option that they have. But you say, does it matter? Is it necessary to succeed? No. I mean, you brought up Wordle. Is there graphics in Wordle?
Yeah, exactly.
No. What's necessary to succeed is that you create something that brings joy to people and entertains them, and that they want to come back and do again.
And there are also like a lot of different types of games. If you think of like, there are games where it's like completely immersive experience that you're going to play for hours and hours, and there's games that are kind of like, as you mentioned, like Wordle. Yeah, it's like a 5-minute a day thing, and it's just kind of a fun little thing you do on the side, and you may even do it while you're watching TV. Or
it's effectively a fidget spinner.
Yeah, exactly. Effectively a fidget spinner. Or you're doing it while you're on the commuting or something, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you think of like the creator economy intersecting with the gaming world, and how do you think that's going to evolve over time?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways it has intersected. Like, if you look at a lot of tools that were born in gaming, they become tools that are relevant across the creator economy more broadly. So if you look at Unity, Unreal, those are 3D engines. But now you see people using those 3D engines to do all sorts of other things. Build a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
People use Unreal for that, and create buildings or scenes or graphical interfaces. You see that, and then there's other like specialty tools. There's this one tool called SpeedTree that people use to actually sort of fill in environments in games. That's now being leveraged in all sorts of other places, including in movies and other things like that. And so people talk about them as separate. I actually think they are highly related in that gaming tools and capabilities and 3D graphics, rendering, being able to do a creative story, all of those things are sort of flowing in the creator economy, and in many ways the bedrock of it.
And how do you think of like the idea of like streaming meets gaming, whether it's like Twitch or something? I mean, I'm still flabbergasted that people watch golf. So, and obviously watching someone play video games is a lot more exciting to me than watching someone, play golf. Like, how do you think of it does seem like a lot of the gaming popularity is being driven also by like these creators who are playing the game.
Yeah, completely. I mean, people spend more hours watching games than playing games. That is a real stat.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
is that true?
It is. It's true.
Oh, my gosh. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think some of it is that you do see people just love the streamers themselves, fall in love with those personalities, right? Just like you would, a personality that plays a sport or that's on TV. Some people do it because it's actually really cool to watch a person play a game well. And then some people do it because they're trying to learn how to play the game themselves. And it does feel quite intuitive to me. I'll say growing up, that's what my family would do. Like, one of us would sit down to play and everybody else would watch it.
Just watch it. Yeah. Exactly. Or you'd have like 2 people playing and then the rest of the kids just kind of watching the 2 people and kind of cheering for them, or that type of thing. And then it's like, hey, it's my turn, jump in.
Right. And what a platform like YouTube gaming or a Twitch has done is it's enabled to take it beyond your household and have it be anyone. It's the difference between couch co-op and online multiplayer in terms of who you can connect with.
And how do you think of like the social piece of it? Like, and some kids I know, when they play Fortnite, like they're playing with their friends and they're actually, it's really just, it's like the chatting is the social piece. But and back in when I was a kid 1,000 years ago, we would be on the couch together, kind of playing, and that was kind of our social way of doing it. So how do you see that evolving, and where do you see like the and how do you see that like affecting society?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. 70% of people under 25 would rather play a video game than engage in any other form of entertainment.
Okay.
Like, including social media. It's amazing. So, and I think it's exactly for the reason that you just said, which is there's the entertainment of playing, but what it really is it's a way to connect with people. And for
they're not just playing single player mode, like they want to play with other people.
Yeah, I mean, some
even
people
if there's
do
other
play
people
single
all
player
over the
mode.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, some people do play single player mode, but the connection I think is really key, and it's different from what you and I grew up with, and it allows people to actually achieve something with someone who can live really far away, you can speak a different language, you can maintain, you can grow those relationships. We have people on our platform who have lifelong friends, best friends they've made, and they've never met them. They've only played games with them. Or they'll come to one of our showcases and they'll meet them for the first time and they're like crying, tears of joy, like I finally saw you in person. And I think that's really powerful because it opens up things like there's a whole set of constraints. If you say, hey, the only people I can connect with, they need to live in my, when you and I were kids, like they need to live in our neighborhood, they probably went to our school.
Yep.
And they need to be within a 5-minute walk because mom was okay with that. Otherwise, you had to organize a drive and you had 3 phone numbers memorized, right? And those are the people you could call to come over to your house.
Totally.
And now that constraint is taken away and you can build that connection with people over long distances. A friend moves away, you don't lose contact with them. My daughter has someone she plays with who moved all the way to the other side of the country. And that's a really powerful thing. I'll tell a story, like during COVID, we didn't used to let my kids play online games a lot. They were 5 and 8 when COVID started, and so we were really careful about it. But then COVID happened, and we're like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah, all the rules are out the window when COVID hit.
Rules are out the window. You're not in school.
We just had just tons of candy in my house.
Yeah. We had a lot of Legos. I was scared the Lego factory was shut down. I swear. And so we said, okay, you can play Minecraft with friends. And they started doing that because that was the only play date they could have.
Boy.
But then I realized that they were actually organizing a play date that I would never organize because they were playing with kids who lived on the other side of the city where, the transit time would be too much, on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then they were playing with the older cousins of one of the kids joined in. And then some kids who had moved on the other side of the country joined in, and they were all of different ages. I was looking at it, I was like, okay, so by nature of playing through a game, a social interaction that otherwise would have never actually existed has come to exist. And so when you talk about how I think it'll shape the future, when you unlock something, it just can't happen any other way. You've unlocked something that people actually want, they desire, but would have just been so practically difficult to do, you would never do it. And that's why I think it becomes an ever more prevalent part of how our society interacts and connects.
Yeah, it's also like when I play, if I just play a game, on the internet anonymously or something, I have no idea who I'm playing with. They might be anywhere in the world. They might be of any age. They could be of any type of demographic. Sometimes you get a sense in the chat of the type of person they are, depending on what they're talking about or how they talk, etc. But it's kind of cool because it's I have no idea, and it's kind of this kind of interesting. You have 15 minutes together on a game, and then you kind of move on. I think it's a really interesting piece of humanity.
Yeah, and I think of it as one of the only way I can think of that you can share an achievement with someone. You cannot meet them. You don't even know what they look like. You don't even speak the same language. You might not have the same ability, right? And you can actually get something done. Not show them something you did, which is a lot of what we see in a lot of other consumer categories. But you can actually collaborate and achieve something together, and I think that's very powerful.
Now, this, of course, is a data podcast. What are the core stats or data that you track that maybe people who are not as steeped in the gaming industry would not think to track?
Well, I thought about that a lot. A lot, when I came to Xbox, a lot of the focus that we had, rightly here, is on player stats, right? Monthly average users, engagement hours, DAU over MAU ratio, monetization per hour, all of these things, all of these things that are related to how our players are engaging on and monetizing in our platform. And I believe that is so core. But what I really learned in my time here is that a platform versus if you're running a game, that's really righteous. If you're running a platform, which I define as a two-sided ecosystem, you sort of need to look at the inverse of that too. right? And so I spend a lot of my time essentially looking at developers and saying, okay, how many developers are developing for us?
Yep.
How many of them are shipping? Of those games are shipping, how healthy are they monetizing? What are their total economics on our platform across like subscription and like how healthy are they? And those are the stats that I think are sort of an unconventional one for a consumer business to look at. But for us, because so much of our success is actually reliant upon making other creators successful, it's really core to the overall health of what we do.
When you think of like, there are certain types of subscription businesses like Netflix or Spotify that have many of the same characteristics as like a Game Pass. But then there's also areas where like those characters where the similarities really break down. Like if you create a movie or a TV show, you could put that anywhere. Maybe Netflix buys the exclusive rights to it, or maybe Netflix is actually producing it. Same thing with the song, that could be anywhere. Maybe it's exclusively on Spotify or something. Likely as it's going to be a lot of different places, including the radio, etc. But sometimes with games it might be just like only on this platform. Like your developer's only putting something on a particular platform or something like that. How do you think about it? And do you study these other businesses like the Netflix and Spotify's of the world?
Yeah, we've studied them a ton. I mean, when we launched a subscription, we said, okay, like a game subscription doesn't exist. Do we think there's demand for it? How many people do we think would rather consume their content through subscription versus not? Yep. What does it mean to only have the content available in subscription versus giving an option? Like we've looked at it from every which way. The fundamental difference, though, for us, I think, versus a lot of the examples you gave, goes back to what I just talked about, which is Xbox isn't a product; it's a platform.
Yep.
So it carries a lot of products. And so we looked at our subscription and we said, well, look, what we're basically saying is that we embrace a diversity of business models. And a diversity of business models is important for consumers because some consumers would rather just buy one game and play it all year, and some consumers love the idea of having access to hundreds of games and being able to skip around and play. And it's a big difference, by the way, in games versus some other forms of media. There are some games where people will literally play them all year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, they live in the game.
Yeah.
Right? A Minecraft could be an example, or you could say, NBA is an example, or FIFA, Call of Duty, that's like 80% of their hours. Most people don't spend 80% of their time watching only one TV show or only one,
good point.
listening to only one song or album. So there are just games because they live and extend, and a lot of the experience is actually based off of the people you're connected with in that virtual world.
Usually, you're right. There's with any type of TV show, there's a limit to how
There's
much.
A limit,
I mean, maybe you can't watch every Star Trek or something, because it goes so many. There's so many, but there's some sort of limit to the number of things that you can go do. Whereas with League of Legends or something like that, like you could play that forever.
They're very different. Yeah, and especially in multiplayer games, it's actually not just the game you're engaging in, it's the people you're connecting with. You could argue, when we often do, that games are actually metaverses, right? And so you're saying, okay, some people, they just want to hang out in one type of world for a huge majority of the time. Other people are like, nope, I want to try a whole bunch of things, or I want to do single-player experiences, story games that are really based off of a deep narrative that act more like TV shows in terms of their, what we call replayability. Some games you play through them, you're not going to play it again, right? Because you know how it ends, you know what happens. And so we say, look, we support multiple models, and that's important because players like that, but also because developers like that. Because in games, the way that you choose to monetize can actually it has a huge impact on the experience of the game itself. So if a game is free to play, like successful free to play games, there's all sorts of monetization at different stages. Oftentimes they're multiplayer, right? Where the people, like if you look at Fortnite, you could argue that the people are the game as much as the game itself, right? Very different than you say, okay, I want to have a dramatic, deep narrative. How am I going to drive monetization in that game? So if we did like what Netflix did, and we said, we're just a subscription business, it's all subscription, now subscription and advertising, but you get where I'm going, we would like accidentally really limit the scope of the games that could be successful in our world. So that's a big difference when we look at all these other consumer businesses. What we're doing is like, look, we're about enabling a set of business model diversity, giving people a ton of different levers, of which Game Pass is one, and other subscriptions that live on our platform is one, so that you have the maximum availability of games to play and experiences that people can have.
Okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. If I think of music, like I haven't bought like an actual CD or any type of download of music, download an album in probably over 10 years. And I buy Spotify and it kind of works for me, and I go to concerts. But like back in the day, I'd buy like an album and I would just listen to that album over and over and over again. Yeah. So there is a change, but even when I bought that album over and over and over again, I was probably spending most of my time listening to music on the radio. Like I still want that diversity in music. You really want a diversity of things. You don't want to just listen to the same song over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Whereas in a game, you're right. Some people want diversity.
Some people do. Yeah.
But actually, quite a lot of people, like, they might want to play the same game like over and over again for a whole month and then move on to the next. They want like maybe that type of diversity, but they really want to immerse themselves. They want to spend often at least a dozen hours in the game before they move on to the next one or something. Okay, that's really, really interesting.
And the other thing I'm saying is like the song you're listening to, even way back when, that song is the same no matter how you bought it.
Yep. There's no choose your own adventure in the song or something.
Yeah. In the case of a game, if a game has a lot of in-game monetization or is a free-to-play game, so the game is basically makes its money based off of how you pay them as you're playing it, versus if you pay 100% for the game up front, the experience of playing the game is very different.
Yeah. Okay.
Distinctly different. So we have to be super careful about that, because if we as a platform say, okay, we want all this thing or all this thing, some types of stories will simply cease to be created.
Now, gaming is inherently a very, very global thing, and often there's global teams and global distribution. I know that's something like you think about a lot, and maybe 20 years ago that wasn't something people were thinking about as much. Like, how do you think when people are developing, distributing games, like how is that global piece a part of the strategy?
Well, first, like, the 3 billion people play games. As I was saying earlier, most of those people are not sitting in North America where we are sitting today. So we're like, look, we've got to be thinking about the needs, the price points, the game preferences of all of these people around the planet if we're actually going to build something that's relevant for them. So that's the first thing. And that's especially relevant as we think beyond our traditional, what we call our traditional console business, and we start to think about how we can do things on PC and on mobile. The second thing, and it was really accelerated by the pandemic, is work location has become, sort of gotten blown apart, right?
Yeah.
And people are looking for the best talent to work on a project, irrespective of where they're located. And in the gaming industry, that has coincided with a massive rise in demand for the talent that makes games. Like, if you just look at the industry over the last couple of years, the industry is going to be over $200 billion. There's been a lot of consolidation, which means that a lot of people are looking to start new teams. So then, like, the demand for gaming talent has just continued to go up and up and up. And so people are like looking for people and saying, okay, you can live in all these different places. We've got to run our team globally distributed. But that's also super hard in a creative process. So there's just been a force that's really hit the industry around more and more teams having to figure out how to work on the cloud, how to collaborate remotely. But then lastly, I see it also as a huge opportunity. Like, when you think about the gaming industry, especially in console, the vast majority of content in the gaming industry is effectively made in North America and East Asia. But we know that the vast majority of gamers actually aren't located in those regions. They're located around the world, and there's massive amounts of people who are going to be gamers who are going to come from regions that haven't even really started engaging deeply yet, like India and Africa. And so distributed development is a way that you can tap into the talent, the culture, the stories of those places in a way that actually enables you to continue to build relevant content. So my team is
because there's movie making in India, which is very successful. There's movie making in Nigeria, which is very successful. The reason why it's so successful is they've tapped into the local culture, but there's got to be some gaming also that happens there as well.
There is, but a lot less relatively than those other segments right now. So you're like, okay, well, how do we give access to the tools? And we've done a bunch of stuff to open it up. Like we've taken our game development kit and we put it on GitHub. We've translated all of our documents. We've taken things out from behind NDA. We've simplified a lot of the tooling, right? To start to, we build things like we launched something last year called the Game Dev Virtual Machine that essentially packages all the sort of essential tools that you need early on in the game development process all into a VM so teams can access it around the world and have the exact same setup. And so we're investing in all sorts of tools and products and services to sort of enable distributed and remote development because we're seeing more and more demand for it. And we also believe that there's just going to be more demand for games from places that haven't traditionally been bedrock of the gaming industry.
Now, say for example, where I work, we sell data about physical places, and when Pokemon Go came out, we were very excited. Oh wow, these are like all these customers that are going to happen in the gaming world. But there haven't been like a ton of games like that have like encouraged people to interact in the real world. Like, where do you think that trend is going?
I just think Pokemon Go in a lot of ways was a beautiful piece of lightning in the bottle. Because it was a great IP, it was something very new, and it was really easy.
Yep.
Right?
It was fun too.
It was easy and fun and the way to connect. And so, and it was beautifully unique. And I think there'll be other games like that, right? I mean, I think there's a real demand for it, but it does take bringing together that unique combination of things to really deliver it and making it really accessible to people.
Now, I'd love to ask you a couple questions about Microsoft. I just find the whole company so fascinating. And, in some ways, like 20 years ago or so, like you wouldn't say Microsoft was a good acquirer. But then recently, obviously in the gaming world, you got ZeniMax, now you got Activision Blizzard, which is, I think, Microsoft's biggest deal to date. You've got, there are rumors that Microsoft might want to purchase Discord. And then, of course, Microsoft's made super successful acquisitions like LinkedIn and GitHub and stuff like that. Like, how do you think that, why has Microsoft transitioned to be such an effective acquirer recently?
Well, I mean, look, there's so many things that have gone into that. I mean, I first want to really credit Satya with the overall Microsoft cultural transformation.
I think GitHub was just like an amazing acquisition, and just
it is amazing. Yeah. There's a lot to it. But look, there's three things. There's sort of three core Microsoft cultural attributes. We talk about diversity, inclusion, customers obsessed, and growth mindset. And really, like if you like unpack growth mindset, I think the Microsoft of the past that you're referring to was a know-it-all culture, right? Like, we know the best. Not invented here. We're the big guys. We don't even need to visit Silicon Valley. Like, we're Microsoft. Please, dock to our processes.
Yeah.
And yeah, that doesn't make for a good acquisition situation, right?
Good
and
point.
it's also a company that's not going to acquire GitHub, right? They're going to, because it's a very different business model, different developer motion than everything else that has made Microsoft successful. And so I think when you look at why we have had our recent track record of success, we flipped it and we've instead approached it with, okay, you do something that we don't do. We want you to be part of our company because we want you to teach us that. Versus, we want you to dock to what we do. And that's been the real core of it when I look across LinkedIn, when I look at GitHub.
That's just like a cultural transformation that needs to happen?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And then with our studios, the other thing we've really learned is there's a difference between acquiring a hard asset and a soft asset. So when you acquire a game studio, yes, you're acquiring some code and IP associated with the games made, but what you're really acquiring is the people.
Yeah.
Spectrum and towers.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
hard asset, and you can let
Yeah.
all the people go, and you probably retained all of the enterprise value. Game studio, I would argue, is almost the other extreme. And so for us, a lot of our learning was, okay, we want these people to be part of our teams. How do we do that in a way that disrupts their core culture as least as possible, while giving them all of the good things that Microsoft gives them in terms of like safety, security, support, you know what I mean, and all of that. And that was another really big lesson for us in the gaming team.
And large companies, even the best run large companies, can often have like amazingly frustrating bureaucracies. Like, how do you keep these employees motivated? Obviously, you compensate them well, but how do you keep them motivated and stop them from going, jumping over to the smaller companies?
Lauren, you want to come work here? You're hilarious. That's such a great question. Well, look, here's a couple things. One, anytime I see something as a leader that has bureaucracy in it, I take a hard look at it and I say, how much do I need to cascade this to my team? And how much can I just handle it myself? I'll be honest, right?
Yeah.
But some of it, you're like, okay, fine, I understand.
So you're like an API layer, and you deal with the bureaucracy, and you don't let
I will go
it
deal
affect
with
your
this.
team.
I will translate it down to my team in a way that's super simple and non-blocker for them so that they can understand it. So that's one thing. The second thing is there is a level at Microsoft where sometimes you're working through something like, oh, this is really hard. Like, I've got a lot of interdependent points. I gotta go talk to a ton of people. Like, it's taking longer than I would if I could do it on my own. But the thing is that oftentimes you're doing things that you could never do on your own.
Of course, yeah, because it's
So
so big.
We're
talking about one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah, and so your ability to have global impact, like at scale impact, is just completely different than when you go to a small company. And so I often spend a lot of time reminding my team, do you know what I mean? Like, you're working on this thing here, but see how it links to this huge thing that we can do over here. Or see how we had an opportunity to help a team or a developer or a group of people in a really unique way that only Microsoft can. And people are very motivated by that, where they see their own tangible work scale, at the scale of, millions and billions of people. Example I'll give is we had a team who we've been working with. They agreed to ship their game in Game Pass. And they're a team in Ukraine, and they're building a game called Stalker 2. And when the war in Ukraine started, first they asked for our help, do you know what I mean, to figure out how to move their team out of Ukraine. And I was able to connect them with someone in Microsoft Security who could give them some advice about how to get their team safe. Again, something I wouldn't have been able to do in a smaller company.
Yeah.
And then
7.9.
they wanted to share an
Just a
update
minute.
on their game
This is
at our
your.
showcase.
You got
this
any
year.
other jewelry on?
But for obvious reasons, a part of
All right, I did an inventory of your stuff.
You
got a pair of shoes, pair of pants, 2 shirts, pair of socks, a belt, a hat, your driver's license, your ID card, your Visa debit card, and a wallet. You got keys, 2 of them. You got a lighter. You got 3 Black and Milds and a beaded bracelet. Sound about right?
Oh,
a cell phone. You have a charger with you?
And we're gonna
Nah,
use our platform
guess I'm about
to help
to
generate
go
support for